Hey, so in case you don't know who he is, Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist and he's also a professor at Stanford, but he gives out a lot of free information on his podcasts. And through watching his podcasts, I've actually improved my brain health, my sleep quality, my energy levels, and just my overall physical and mental health. I kind of think of him as when I used to play video games and I'd read the video game manual or just go into settings and read the things about my character, and I was able to do things I wasn't previously able to do. So I really don't know why everyone doesn't watch Andrew Huberman, except I do. It's because his podcasts are sometimes 3 hours long. But if you watch any of my previous videos, you know how much I like Andrew Huberman. And a lot of my friends give me crap sometimes. They're like, oh, so you just blindly trust Andrew Huberman? But my thinking is, I'm not going to be the one that reads the 50-page research papers or the 1,000-page studies. That's what he does. So my mindset is he says jump. I don't second guess him or anything. I just ask how high. And it's been working out so far, so why stop now? But in this video, I watched his podcast on how to learn skills faster, and I actually took color-coded notes, which I'll actually put on screen if you want to screenshot and check them out. And there's a lot of great stuff in there, but today I just wanted to share with you 7 things to keep in mind and things to do that I personally started doing and going to continue doing to hopefully learn martial arts faster and better. So a study he mentioned was the Super Mario effect, which is where they took 50,000 people and they had to program something, but they split the 50,000 people up into 2 groups. Group 1, whenever they made a mistake, they said that did not work, please try again, versus group 2, whenever they made a mistake, it said on their screen, you just lost 5 points, please continue. And they found that group 1 had a 68% success rate in programming the task, versus group 2 only had a 52% success rate in programming the task. They also found that group 1 gave many more attempts in trying the thing they got wrong, versus group 2 gave up much earlier or gave up entirely. He also mentioned a very similar study with rats that pretty much said the same thing. But basically the moral of the story is whenever you make a mistake, just understand it's part of the learning process. And I think this is a little bit harder in martial arts because whenever you make a mistake in martial arts, you actually get punched in the face, or if you're doing jiu-jitsu, you get choked out. But yeah, as corny as it sounds, the evidence from the study shows that when you mess up, you just gotta keep trying. So after the podcast ended and Andrew Huberman was giving the summary of all the things to do, he said that reps and errors is the main thing that you need to do to get better at the skill. And this is because when you do reps and make errors, it creates this thing in your brain called neuroplasticity. And I kind of understand what it is from watching so many of his podcasts, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really smart enough to explain it to you right now. So I just put the Google definition up here. In time I will be, but as of right now, no. But basically when you do reps and make errors, it reinforces the correct movements in your brain and it helps get rid of the incorrect ones. But he mentioned that making errors is actually super important to learning a skill and actually mandatory because it tells your central nervous system, which is just smart people words for your brain and body basically, but it tells your central nervous system what exactly to fix so that you could do it correctly. So this kind of relates to the previous study. The errors actually give you feedback on what to correct. Now he mentioned that right after you finish a skill learning session, your brain plays everything you just learned backwards. So what Dr. Huberman suggested was right after your skill learning session, just sit there with your eyes shut from 1 to 5 to 10 minutes, basically any time that you could give to let your brain download everything, as opposed to distracting your brain with other things like scrolling on your phone or calling someone right after practice. But what I do personally is after my training sessions, when I'm stretching, instead of scrolling on my phone, which I used to do a lot of, I just stretch with my eyes closed and try to let everything process and just chill out for a little bit. Or if I don't do that, I'll sit in my car and just sit there with my eyes closed for a little bit. And I do this not only to help my brain download everything, it's also because sometimes I get out practice at 8:30, sometimes even 9, and I have to go to sleep at 10 or 11. And if I don't do anything to chill out, I'll still be too amped up to go to sleep and I won't be able to fall asleep. So just relaxing with your eyes shut kills 2 birds with 1 stone for me. So he mentioned that right after your brain plays everything backwards, but he also mentioned that when you go to sleep that night, it actually plays everything forwards. And this was actually mentioned to me by my driving instructor. He said, oh, by the way, when you go to sleep tonight, you're probably gonna have dreams about driving, and he explained the same stuff. And just from personal experience, this is totally true. That night I did have dreams about driving, and when I was playing football, I would always have dreams about playing football. And now that I'm learning martial arts, I usually have martial arts related dreams now. So when you're sleeping, it's also a good time to let your brain download everything, which is another reason why sleep is so important. And I actually have 2 videos on sleep, which I'll try and link up somewhere here, and I'll also put in the description. But if your sleep quality isn't the best, you should definitely check those out, because those are the things I did personally that helped me sleep better. So Dr. Huberman mentioned that once you're somewhat familiar with the movement, the best way to get better at it is just to focus on one specific thing. So an example of this this in boxing is just during a session, just the main thing that you focus on is keeping your chin tucked if that's a problem you have. Or something that I'm personally going to start working on right now is just making sure my knuckle turns over when I punch instead of like leaving it like this when I punch. And a lot of martial arts coaches that I've had has told me this. They just been like, oh, just focus on one main thing for right now. And you know this is true if you have any experience with striking, because you know that there's so many little tweaks that you have to make to have the proper technique. Like your chin tuck, making sure you're twisting your hips, having your shoulders cover your chin, making sure you breathe out when you punch. Like there's so many little things, you're not going to fix them all in one session. At least not me, maybe you're built different though. But he also mentioned when first learning a technique, it's better to focus on the motor movement, which is just smart people talk for the technique, as opposed to focusing on the reward or the result. So an example of this would be if your coach is teaching you a new kick or a new punch, focus on the technique instead of how loud the pad sounds when you punch it or when you kick it. So yeah, just two things to keep in mind. Now, this is something a coach of mine right now drills into me a lot, but he always says that if I want to get better, I have to go real speed. And Andrew Huberman said the exact same thing. And he said this is for two reasons. First one is so that the feedback you get is accurate, because the feedback your central nervous system gets when you're doing it in slow-mo is much different than if you're doing it actual speed. And number two is because you can't generate the errors you need for the neuroplasticity. And like he said before, errors are mandatory to let your central nervous system know what to fix. So something I started doing ever since I learned this information was, instead of always shadowboxing kind of a little bit slower than what I would actually punch, because I was just focusing on doing the correct technique, I started doing a lot more shadowboxing where I'm going the real speed that I would actually be going at. And whenever I'm doing partner drilling work, I'll actually go at a realistic speed. Before, I'd go super slow whenever I was doing drills, and sometimes I'd even miss on purpose. And I'd think I was being a good partner by doing that, but in reality, I was actually being a shitty partner, because I was actually getting them worse, because they're not getting a realistic look of what's to come. And you know, like Andrew Huberman said, I wasn't giving them the real feedback for their central nervous system, and I wasn't giving them the errors they need for neuroplasticity. And of course, I'm going real speed, but I'm definitely not going full power, because I don't want to hurt my partners. And also, I definitely don't want them going full power with me, because if they went full power with me, I'd probably get knocked out. But yeah, even Andrew Huberman says you need to go a realistic speed to get better. But he did say that going slow and really focusing on the technique does have its benefits. He said that you should only be going super slow once you have a success rate of doing the correct technique 20 to 25% of the time. So basically, if you do it right 1 in every 4 or 5 times. So according to him, going slow does have its place, but making sure you get realistic reps in is mandatory. Now, this thing you've probably heard of, and that's visualization. And there is evidence that does help you improve. I actually have heard of something separate to this podcast where they took a group of people and they had them shoot basketballs in the basket. One group, they just had them relax for a couple weeks, or a couple days, I forgot. And the other group, they told them to visualize making the baskets and, you know, shooting basketballs and whatnot. And they tested both of the groups again, and they found that the group that did the visualization actually did better. So visualization is perfect if you're on the plane, or it's a rest day for you, or you're injured. But something that Andrew Huberman mentioned was that although it works, and there's evidence that it does work, it's still not as effective as actually practicing the movement. And he talked about a study for this, but they did an experiment where they tested people's finger curling strength and their bicep curling strength, and they had a group of people who visualized curling their finger for 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 12 weeks, and the same people were also visualizing curling their bicep, and they actually found that the people who visualized it increased their finger curling strength by 35%, and the people who visualized the bicep curl increased their bicep curl strength by 13.5%. But they had a separate group of people who actually did the exercise and practiced in real life with real weights, I'm assuming, and they improved by 53%. So 35% and 13% versus 53%. So the evidence says it's a lot more worth it to actually do the thing in person. So it's obvious that visualization does have its place, but if your friend calls and asks you, hey, are you coming to practice today? You can't be like, oh no, I did a lot of visualizations today, I think I'm good. But I'm gonna try to explain it, but he said the reason visualization works is because it still activates the upper motor neurons in your brain, which is the part of your brain which commands the movement. It just doesn't activate the lower motor neurons or the central pattern generators. Alright, last thing is metronomes. He mentioned that swimmers sometimes do this thing where they put like a little speaker or earbud in their cap, and it plays a sound, and they're supposed to stroke every time that sound plays. And by putting that sound in, it helps them stroke at the correct pattern. pause. And he actually mentioned that it could also help them go faster, not just with swimmers, but also with sprinters and runners. But I was thinking, and I feel like this is what good pad holders do already. Like, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I have a pad holder and he says jab cross hook, when I punch, he'll go ha ha ha. And the coach of mine mentioned that people do this so that you get on the same rhythm as them. Like, it just gives you an audio cue. So ever since I learned this, I always make sure to make a sound whenever I want my partner to hit the pad, or at the correct cadence I want my partner to hit the pad. I don't say anything, I just do the breath with them. So if I say jab cross hook, I'll just be like shh shh shh. And this way it also helps me practice my breathing too. And I've always done this a little bit because my first pad holder that I had always used to do this with me when I was hitting pads. But yeah, right now I just always make sure to focus on my partner's timing when I'm hitting pads and the audio cues they're giving. I don't do what the swimmers do, and I haven't got an earbud to help me punch on the same timing as the sound. But maybe later down the road I will start doing something like that. Alright, so those are the 7 things that I'm gonna keep in mind and gonna start doing to hopefully improve at martial arts faster. But one last thing I wanted to say was, I feel like martial arts is a little bit harder to learn than if you're learning to play the violin, because if you mess up on the violin, the sound just sounds a little bit off, versus in martial arts, when you mess up you actually get punched or you get kicked, or if you're doing jiu-jitsu you get choked out, or your arm gets on the verge of snapping from an arm bar. And I know personally how much it sucks because I'm only a year and a half into martial arts, so I'm still in the phase of struggling a decent amount. Of course there's always going to be someone on a higher level than you. It's just, as of right now, the vast majority of people that I train with are on the higher level than me. And not just with martial arts, I'm also pretty new to YouTube, so even when I'm recording these videos I'm stuttering all over the place, or I'm not making eye contact with the camera. But as Andrew Huberman said, as long as I keep getting in the reps and making the errors and getting in more reps and making more errors and getting the good neuroplasticity from those reps and errors, I think I'll be fine. And if you're starting out something new too, whether that be a martial art or whatever you're doing, I think you'll be fine too. But if you are starting out in martial arts, I did a video on my 7 favorite fights that I like to watch for martial arts inspiration, which you should check out if you have time. But if you also want to listen to the full Andrew Huberman podcast I watched, I'll link it right here somewhere. I recommend listening to it even if it's passively while you're driving or while you're cleaning your room, just because there's a lot of stuff I left out. But again, good luck on your martial arts journey if you are on one, or whatever you're doing right now. And I appreciate you watching until the end, it means a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.